at the end of the show. AI in the police state. So they've got AI in Yonkers watching cameras for people, and it flags issues before the 911 call gets pulled in. So I've got that video for you as well. How long before you think this is going to get rolled out everywhere? I remember when I was a kid, the internet didn't exist. We had like long distance phone calls were expensive in 1991, and getting a long distance phone plan, everybody wanted your business. That was all the commercials were. It was like, get our phone plan, get our phone, Sprint. There's all sorts of other ones. And we had to dial a long number in order to get cheap long distance. It was ridiculous. Anyway, the technology took a long time to roll out. And even though we were in Guelph, I knew people in Toronto had more television stations, and the Guide channel, remember the Guide channel? They had that and we didn't have that like suckers. But then it got rolled out quickly. The internet got rolled out, and then you could dial in. And I thought, man, we're going to be stuck with this dial-in internet forever. And then it very rapidly, the technology rolled out very rapidly, and I was really surprised, to the point where like I knew people who got second phone lines in order to have a dedicated phone line to the internet, and then they got rid of that second phone line in order to have just always on internet. And I thought, man, like that seems expensive, right? But AI in police, I think that's going to get rolled out very, very fast, just like the internet did in the early 90s, mid-late 90s, early mid-late 90s. Diddy releases names, and people are holding a press conference saying the names are shocking. You'll be shocked. Prepare to be shocked. And Randy Bolsonaro is upset that Danielle Smith is talking about chemtrails. I'm not kidding. Holy cow, there's a lot to get to. Let's get to it. And we have to start Iran, like the whole Iran thing. There's missile strikes. There's everything. There's all sorts of stuff going on. There's saber rattling. It seems like we're watching a movie or something. I don't know. It seems really interesting. We're going to look at that first. I've got a meme for you. It says, they don't silence us, me, for posting false information. That's not why they silence people like me. That's the excuse they use. They silence people like me for exposing their agenda, right? So when I'm skeptical, I'm like the guy who refuses to stand up at the bell, right? I'm just not playing your game. It sounds like nonsense to me. So plausible that it's nonsense. So anyway, lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start in Iran attacking Israel, and Hezbollah and Iran attacking Israel, and Israel saying you've messed up now. And OSINT Defender says footage claiming to show Iranian ballistic missiles launches from near the city of Tabriz in northern Iran. So there's all these missiles. And I mean, again, it's the internet. Take it with a grain of salt. Everybody and his dog's talking about this, though. So there are lots of people saying that this is legit, 100% real. These missile strikes are happening. And, Israel is under attack, and, everybody's got to freak out and the whole thing. And like, okay, somebody said, doesn't the Iron Dome work such that if the missile is not going to target a place that's populated or whatever, it ignores it in favor of going for a target that's going to harm people, etc.? And so people were saying most of these missiles are going to unpopulated areas that aren't going to actually result in harm. So I haven't seen a result of this. Like I haven't seen, it's all blown up and burnt out or anything to that effect. So I don't know. This is what happened last night, and I haven't seen much this morning. Just like I've done my usual rounds. So sometimes after things like that, you see like, it's 5-6 hours ahead there. So like morning light has come. They've been able to discern things by the time 6 or 7 o'clock comes around for us. And I look at all that kind of stuff, and I mix it up and I put it in my show, right? I've done my usual rounds. I haven't seen anything. So that's weird. I mean, not to say it hasn't happened but right? Who knows? I haven't seen it. So if I do see something, I'll show you tomorrow, right? Here's Netanyahu, Bibi, and he says, Iran made a big mistake and it will pay for it. So justification for further escalation of war. Now Israel gets to respond. Right? So Iran did this heinous act and sent missiles towards Israel, and now Israel gets to have their turn. And Canada's asked, what do you think? Now, I think that it's weird as well. Like Canada doesn't have any clout, doesn't have any kind of horse in this race. What we think is irrelevant, really. The foreign minister, okay, fine. She's saying they should stop this war. Okay, we're on the side of peace and stuff, but it seems like we're way too focused on foreign countries rather than what's going on in our own country, the invasion that's happening, et cetera, et cetera. Here is Melissa Lantsman. She's the deputy leader of the CPC, deputy house leader. And she says, they say one thing, the liberals say one thing to a group of people and the opposite thing to another group of people. Today, This is today, 2 statements, 16 minutes apart. Now, like, this is Mel Jolie in a press conference and Anthony Housefather in the House. So here we go.
Canada's position that Israel should not respond to Iran. I mean, you've called for a ceasefire vis-a-vis Hezbollah, but this attack from Iran, is Canada asking Israel not to respond in kind?
We need to make sure that there's no escalation.
I pray for a world where Israel can defend itself from Iranian and Hezbollah missiles without being condemned, and one where it can live securely in peace with its neighbors.
I mean, it seems like the premise of, don't you think Israel has a right to defend itself, seems like a loaded question in and of itself. That's not really what we should be focusing our attention on at this point in time, in my opinion. But that's always the question. Israel was attacked. Don't you think they have a right to defend themselves? And if you say, well, it's more complicated than just that, now all of a sudden you're an anti-Semite and you need dealing with, right? And so it's very, very interesting. Here's a bit more of Mel Jolie's statement. The back and forth is 46 seconds. We'll listen to it all.
Canada's position that Israel should not respond to Iran. I mean, you've called for a ceasefire vis-a-vis Hezbollah, but this attack from Iran, is Canada asking Israel not to respond in kind?
We need to make sure that there's no escalation. Of course, Israel needs to be able to protect itself, and that's why we'll continue to support its security, and we'll support, of course, through the Iron Dome. At the same time, we need to make sure that parties sit down and the war stops, because we can see that what will happen, there will be even more further escalation, more innocent civilians, including women and children, die. And that's what I said at the UN yesterday. We need this war to stop.
It's like having a strong opinion about what your neighbor's doing. But like, you know your neighbor, you've talked to him, you've gone and, maybe looked after his cat or something like that. You don't have a right to tell him how to do things unless he's infringing on us, you, your country, yourself, your house, whatever it is. In this analogy, your house, I think, right? And so it seems to me the whole, all Israel would need to justify any kind of war measures towards any country is an attack by that country on Israel. And then they say, well, we're responding. Don't you agree that Israel has a right to defend itself? And if you say, well, it's more complicated than that, they don't like that answer, right? And so, and again, I just think it's really strange how the foreign minister is kind of trapped with that question. And it's not a valid question. I don't think it's a valid question, right? It is loaded, and it is meant to put you on one side of it or the other. The politics of the question are evident in the asking of it, right? And so I don't think that it's fair, and I don't think that our news media or our politicians are doing us any favors by focusing wholly on Israel or wholly on Middle Eastern wars and ignoring the tent cities in Canada, right? Like, I've got a real big problem with that. CBC Watcher, let's move on, talk about free speech. CBC Watcher says, for the sake of Blacklock's reporter and all other businesses that depend on paywalls and password protection, the Attorney General, that's Arif Varini, should petition the federal court to vacate the Blacklock's decision. This would finally remove the doubt that has been cast over the validity of passwords. So if you don't know what's going on, the federal government paid for access for one person for Blacklock's reporter, but shared the password around the federal government, and multiple dozens of people, I think up to a dozen people, I don't think like 24 people, I think a dozen people, maybe a few more than that, shared the password and used the access to monitor the Blacklock's reporter. And Blacklock's took them to court, and the court sided with the government, saying, yeah, the government can do that, whatever they want. And that invalidates password protection. Like, if you take the Canada Poly login and you share it among all your friends, right? Like, I would have no legal recourse for that, right? And I mean, while that's nice, I don't necessarily depend on the, you have to pay for my stuff. I put half an hour of the show out for free. And I used to put the whole thing out for free until they freaking well canceled me. So anyway, regardless of all of that, it's funny to me that the government does that to protect its own ass while invalidating its broader kind of the intent of the law to protect people's intellectual property and things like that, right? It's very, because the government says, oh, intellectual property is really important and we have to protect the people who have created the intellectual property. And if you steal that online, even if it's just for personal use, you're a terrible person, and so on and so forth. And like, again, it's more complicated than that, right? But they want to make it very not complicated. They want to make it very black and white. And if you listen to their black and white, they're on the wrong side of that, right? Whatever side is the wrong side for you. So weird. They're on the wrong side of any kind of moral standing. And they don't care. They're like, yeah, it's fine. Screw you, Blacklocks. That's what the government says. Jimmy Dore is responding to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks posted this. He's got Julian Assange at a press conference. He's looking Julian Assange, right? Like, wow, he's out of jail. So that's, I mean, good. I've heard weird, crazy things for years about Julian Assange's mental state, his deteriorating mental state, his all sorts of crazy stuff. And so it's nice to see him out of jail, because it was one of those things that in a society where they can just put somebody in jail for releasing video from a source, that seems like a direct threat to free speech or something like that. It really does. And so that now that he's out, that's better. It's still not fixed because we've got the Coots guys in. We've still got Canada trying to prosecute Tamara Lich and Chris Barber and so on and so forth. Not that other guy, right? Not BJ Dichter, but Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Right. Makes perfect sense. But anyway, I digress. Here's Jimmy Dore, and he's talking about this WikiLeaks release from October 1st. And the quote is from Julian Assange. He says, "I want to be totally clear. I'm not free today because the system worked. I'm free today because after years of incarceration, I pled guilty to journalism. I pled guilty to seeking information from a source." Julian Assange, Council of Europe. So he's giving a press conference and people are there, and it's interesting. Jimmy Dore says, "The enemy of a free press and journalism is the United States government. We are ruled by criminals and they don't want their crimes exposed. Assange was in prison for telling the truth, not for lying." Truth. Somebody sent this to me yesterday, and thank you. I did not see the Odyssey comment, so thank you for sending it directly to my email, and it's on my list. If you want to check out my list, it's at CanadaReport.co, and it's on the right-hand side here, things I'm watching, and you can just click on it, and this is on the 293 thing. And so these guys do an hour and 10 minute long conversation on Bill 293, talking about the judiciary system, health, land, body. They say basically you can kiss it all goodbye. I haven't listened to it yet, but I intend to. So thank you very much for sharing. And link is in the description if you're interested. So I am worried about 293. I'm worried about C63. I think that the West is trying to remove free speech. I think that that's intolerable. And I think that free people will rise up and not allow it to continue. But that all takes time, and in something happening like this, there's going to be casualties. And by casualties, I don't necessarily mean deaths, but death might happen, right? Like in a false flag, people get hurt and die. In a situation like this, where they're trying to fundamentally reimagine their responsibilities with regard to free speech and expression and all of that, people are going to be caught up in being swept away in legal ridiculousness. Various legal ridiculousness, and there are going to be problems with that. And I mean, just look at look at the Coots guys, right? And so something like that is possible as this is getting sorted out. And while I don't think it'll last long term, what do you mean by long term, right? Like the Soviet Union lasted 70 years, and it took Chernobyl to collapse it. And so if they establish this new world order, it's going to be very difficult to unwind it. How difficult? Well, here's an example. Already, it is difficult to speak out against Truth and Reconciliation Day. If you speak out against Truth and Reconciliation Day by pointing out the fact that they don't have any evidence to back up their claims, or the fact that there have been no bodies found, or the fact that they're basically lying about this in order to reimagine our history, you get called out, and people start trying to find who employs you in order to inform the employer that you're some kind of anti-Semite or whatever. And so I think that is only going to intensify. And so when they cancel Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving and Truth and Reconciliation Day are at odds, and somebody stands up and says, "You can't do that. This is Canadian culture, and you're supposed to be protecting Canadian culture," and blah, 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 blah. They'll throw that guy in jail, just like Keir Starmer threw the people who were saying we don't want to live in Islamic Britain in jail, right? And I think that's how this is going to go. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that we're able to avoid that, but I haven't seen any indication that we will be. Fingers crossed I'm wrong, right? So, and it's not going to be everybody, but just look at what's happened to Britain, right? Like England didn't used to be Islamic, and now 50%, right? More. Here is, I like this. Let's talk about China. I like this meme. I love memes. They're fun, and they convey a lot of information in a short amount of time. This is a meme with Justin Trudeau. Is that Chrystia Freeland or is that Rosie Barton? I'm not sure. And Justin Trudeau is saying, election interference, should we look into it further? And Rosie Christina says, I don't see any reason to, because they've both got Chinese blinders on. Like if you've ever seen a horse wearing blinders, right? Like the horse, I don't know why me putting my hands up is going to help the people who are listening, but blinders on either side of the horse's head. These ones are made of Chinese flags, and Justin Trudeau and Rosie Christina are both blinded by the blinders, and they can't see any reason to investigate Chinese interference in our government. Here is Andy Lee sharing this Holly Doan piece, and this was from October 1st. And Holly Doan says Prime Minister Trudeau and the federal officials were warned 163 times of foreign interference over a 6-year period. There's a Twitter account that I can't click into. Show Trudeau as late as 2023 denied he was ever told of illegal activity by foreign agents. So who's lying? Andy Lee says Trudeau as late as 2023 denied he was ever told of illegal activity by foreign agents. And she says a newly disclosed Canadian Security Intelligence Service logbook of 163 separate meetings was tabled with the Commission on Foreign Interference. So how does that look? It looks like Justin Trudeau is compromised as all get out, right? Like that's not great. That's very bad, in fact. Sam Cooper says Chinese media in Canada amplifies division and Beijing's narratives, Commission hears. Beijing aims to amplify conflicts in Canada, including troubled history on Indigenous issues, according to FIC testimony. I was talking with Greg, and I was talking with, who else? There was a bunch of people. There's somebody online, Tom Mazzaro. Tom Mazzaro said, listen, I'm really sick and tired of all you people fighting about these stupid things. Like every day you come out here and you fight about stupid shit. I'm paraphrasing, but he was talking about how all the time he's attacked with nonsense claims, misrepresented claims, divisive claims that are maybe have a hint of truth to them, but are mostly lie, right? Like hint of truth being like that person was in that place, but none of anything else happened, right? Like stuff like that. And so like there's this group of, and I don't really talk to any of them because I don't use Twitter as a place to like build friendships or anything. I don't talk to anybody on Twitter like they're my buddy. I'm just there to collect news stories, really. Like, but there are people out there who use conflict to grow their accounts. And so I was talking about this, and the more I think about it, the more I think that it fits in with like the fostering division, because like PPC and CPC, both groups of supporters are very live and let live for the most part, because Canada is very live and let live. And so if you disagree on one thing but agree on like 7 other things, most people would just say live and let live on that one thing. Like I'm not gonna browbeat you over that thing. Let's talk about all these other things that we do agree about, and you know, maybe we can come to a consensus on that other thing. And often that other thing is, I mean, sure, it's a third rail issue. Sometimes it's abortion. Sometimes it's immigration. You name it, right? Like it's meant to be a third rail issue. It's never the same issue. It's always just a contentious issue. And saying like, oh, you PPCs are so racist. You PPCs or you CPCs do this with the globalists, right? And it's like this caustic explosion of division in people who would normally be allies and have government and balance of power, or government and opposition positions, right? Like it's a weird situation, but the division is the point. And that's what I see. And maybe those people are incentivized to do that because they see their accounts grow. But they blocked me because I kept saying, why are you encouraging this division instead of trying to find common ground? Why? What does it get you? How does this help Canada? And they blocked me. So I guess they don't want to help Canada. They just want to grow their accounts, yo. I mean, that's the real thing here, right? How many Twitter followers do I have? Jeepers creepers. True North is reporting. Let's move on. So China's like super duper in charge, and we're getting caught up in stupid fights over and over again at the behest of foreign governments, and we're too busy, too caught up in our own nonsense to even realize it. Pretty wild. True North is reporting. Let's talk about elections very quickly. Aside from Quebec, the NDP has pulled ahead of the Liberals in the rest of Canada, according to True North, for voting intentions among committed voters for the next federal election. So, wow. And the NDP, I think we're on track for like 17 seats. So I'd be surprised if the NDP got more than 40 seats, because Jagmeet Singh has sold out his party and Canadians. And whatever kind of working man's party the NDP used to be, they've long since abandoned the working man, unless the working man is a rabid communist aged 20 to 28. Like, honestly. Bradshaw, and then they don't really work, do they? Bradshaw says, a non-confidence vote defeated, and Jagmeet Singh happily voted to keep Justin Trudeau in power, and Mark Garrettson could barely stay awake. So this was yesterday at like 4 o'clock in the House. Oh, it was 5:30 p.m. in the House of Commons. And so this is... I think they're pushing through confidence votes every time they have a chance. The Conservatives are, and just getting it on record. How many times can Jagmeet Singh support this corrupt Chinese influenced government? Seems like a bunch, and no consequences. Doesn't seem, well, electorally. We'll see. We'll see if he gets 17 seats next time. I can't believe they'd even get that many. When Kathleen Wynne was thrown out of Ontario, they got 7 seats. The Liberals, it went from like the governing party with majority of seats to 7. I hope that happens to the current Liberals, and I hope that 7 is like more than double their seats. I hope they get 2 seats, and if they don't get 2 seats, I hope they get 3 seats. If they can't get no seats, right? If no seats is something that doesn't happen, I hope it's 2 or 3. 1 would be okay too, I guess. Although I'd really seriously question it. I would be like, what? Like 1 riding in the entire country went Liberal? Why? Like, who are these idiots? Okay. Anne says, probably rigged. I don't want to victim blame. Anne is responding to Naya. Naya says, if you can't put 2 and 2 together, this is Chrystia Freeland running cover for her lineage. Blacklock's reporter is reporting, Cabinet they want a Nazi list kept secret. Cabinet should not declassify a secret blacklist of suspected Nazi collaborators recommended for prosecution 39 years ago. Ukrainian-Canadian Congress said yesterday suspects named in the confidential 1985 list, even if long dead, have several generations of descendants who deserve privacy, said the congressional president. Today we hear repeated calls for the disclosure of the names of these innocent people. Yeah, I mean, they should disclose those names. Innocent people. Weren't they suspected Nazi collaborators? Suspected Nazi collaborators, and we can't verify anything because we're not allowed to look into it. So they'll stay innocent. Thank you very much. Innocent until proven guilty, right? So, but you can't prove them guilty. So loophole, because everything's classified and you don't get any access to anything. Interesting. Here's Dan, and Dan is talking about climate change, and he says, unbelievable. Emails obtained from Minister Guilbeault's department revealed that discussion of political optics being more important than proper fire management practices before Jasper wildfires. The Liberals were warned that Jasper was a tinderbox. So we've known this. We've known that the fire management hadn't been happening. We've known that Mr. Guilbeault had been warned and asked to act and did not act. It's interesting that there's no accountability, though, right? Like, that's a very concerning situation, if you ask me. Here we go.
An email obtained from the Environment Minister's Department revealed a senior official was questioning the political optics of forest management practices that prevent wildfires. The email stated, at what point do we make the organizational decision to cancel planned prescribed burns in Western Canada? Political perception may become more important than actual prescription windows, end quote. Why were the political optics more important than forest management to the minister months before Jasper wildfires?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, with members opposite
are doing is absolutely shameful. As the Minister of Environment explained to this House yesterday, they are taking an email out of context, and now that official is facing death threats. Mr. Speaker, what happened in Jasper is a national tragedy, but it is a result of climate change. If the members opposite want to get to the bottom of this, they should start by recognizing that climate change is real. Thank you.
The only way we can fix this problem is if you admit climate change is real. Checkmate. What? Why didn't we do backburns? Because climate change is real? So we stopped doing forestry management? You lunatics. It doesn't make any rational sense at all. Climate change is real. Things are going to get worse. Let's stop doing any kind of forestry management so we get lots more forest fires. One of these things doesn't make any kind of sense whatsoever. Actually, none of those things make any kind of sense whatsoever. Here is what they're trying to criminalize. If your business accidentally pollutes through its economic activity, well, you're just the same as a murderer. Here we go.
Since we have to accelerate action and ambition from all sides, not only business, governments as well. And I think also there's a lot of individual change that we have to promote to just really get where we need to get. So you work on a very new concept called ecocide. So many people don't understand what this legal definition is and what does it bring. So can you please explain a little bit to us, but also tell us, in your opinion, what has to change in current business and investment models to make sure this long-term thinking and ecological considerations are included in decisions and practices?
Absolutely. So, I mean, ecocide as a word is becoming better known around the world, and the concept is generally mass damage and destruction of nature. But legally speaking, what our organisation and other collaborators aim to do is to have this recognised legally as a serious crime. Because one of the issues that sort of pervades all of this discussion is that we have a kind of cultural, very ingrained habit of not taking damage to nature as seriously as we take damage to people and property. And that, I mean, if you're campaigning for human rights, at least you know mass murder, torture, all of these things are serious crimes. But there's no equivalent in the environmental space. And so, unlike an international crime like genocide that involves a specific intent, with ecocide, what we see is actually what people are trying to do, what businesses are trying to do is make money, is farm, is fish, is do all of these things that are, producing energy and so on as well. But what's missing is the awareness and the conscience around the side effects, around the collateral damage that happens with that. Mm-hmm. We're all talking a little bit as though, the changes that are happening and the shocks that are happening are inevitable. But actually, there are quite simple. For example, with ecocide, it's a really straightforward kind of intervention at the legal level that could actually start to steer everything in a healthier direction.
I wonder what their simple legal intervention is. Arrest them. Jeepers creepers. So, ecocide. They're going to try and claim that you are just killing people with your evil economic activity. How dare you run a business? Don't you know you're an ecocidist? And just sticking with the environment, et cetera, weather modification is something that I've become interested in because it was something that I didn't think that we had the capability of doing. And then I learned that we do have the capability of doing that through Alberta, actually, shockingly. In Alberta, the insurance companies have permission and have since 1996 to spray the skies to reduce the size of hail. Believe it or not, it is allowed to operate from June 1st to September 15th. And here it says to combat rising claims and costs, claims like insurance claims from hail damage. Alberta's insurance companies formed the Alberta Severe Weather Management Society, ASWMS, in 1996. The mandate of the ASWMS was to create a weather modification system known as the Alberta Hail Suppression Project, AHSP. This $3 million per year operation functions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from June 1st to September 15th. The program involves specially modified planes flying into storms, spraying silver iodine to help reduce the severity of hailstorms. In turn, this reduces the damage caused by hailstorms to property. There you go. This is a long-standing, well-known thing. I've reported on this years ago. It's one of the things that I was like, well, if they do that, then like, what else are they doing? It was one of the things that opened my eyes to this whole thing. And so Randy Balsano is smearing Danielle Smith for sharing misinformation when she was asked by a constituent at a local town hall about chemtrails. And she said, well, I don't know anything about chemtrails. I'd have to find out. And she found out, and apparently somebody told her that if anybody's spraying, it's probably the United States government. And so people are like, honestly, I'll show you the news article. We'll get there. Oh, we'll get there. But it is the attack, the unbridled attack against Danielle Smith, to call her insane, to call her, like, to marginalize her for even talking about chemtrails. Tim Caulfield's on the attack. He's saying, why don't you just correct these conspiracy theorists? And like, these people are not genuine, right? They are saying this because they think that that'll be the end of it. Nobody will question them. But there are more questions. Anyway, here is one of the two Randys. Here we go.
I wanted to chat with everybody today about Alberta. And I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that Premier Smith is using her office to peddle conspiracy theories. This week it's chemtrails and misinformation about the RCMP. I simply don't get it. We've got a lot of issues in Alberta right now in a growing province. We've got an education system that needs more money for the teachers that are already there. We gave them $25 billion for a healthcare system that needs to be fixed. We've got an opioid crisis and a homelessness crisis. We simply need the Premier to do her job. And talking about chemtrails simply doesn't do the work.
How is she not doing her job? Why are you running against the UCP?
Well, I can tell you when I'm on the doors, people see.
So he said, why are you running against the UCP? And that's a valid question. Here's Timothy Caulfield. He says the same kind of stuff. The Pentagon and NORAD respond to Danielle Smith. Nope, we're not spraying chemtrails over Alberta. But this is an attack against Danielle Smith, trying to undermine what she's trying to listen to her constituents. That's all she's trying to do. Here's Dave, and he says, Alberta Premier Smith's office says her recent comment about chemtrails doesn't mean she believes the United States government is spraying them in the province. So here's the article. CTV News Edmonton is reporting Danielle Smith comes under fire for comments about chemtrails. So Alberta Premier Smith's office says recent comments. The Premier was simply sharing what she had heard from folks over the summer on the issue. Smith's spokesperson Savannah Johnson said Tuesday in a statement. She was not saying that she believed the U.S. government was using chemtrails in Alberta. Johansson added, the Premier has heard concerns from many Albertans about this topic. In response, the provincial government looked into the issue and found no evidence of chemtrails occurring in Alberta. Smith faced criticism after she spoke about the chemtrails this past weekend at a United Conservative Party town hall in Edmonton. During the town hall, in response to an audience member's concerns about chemtrail spraying over Edmonton, Smith said, the best I've been able to do is talk to the woman who's responsible for controlling the airspace, and she says no one's allowed to go up and spray anything in the air. That's not true. I just showed you, and here it is again. It depends on when the question was asked, but until September 15th, people were allowed to spray things in the air. And so when was the question asked? So Smith added, the other person told me if anyone's doing it, when the crowd hooted and booed, Smith said, that's what she told me. Smith said, the other person told me that if anyone is doing it, it's the U.S. Department of Defense. Smith said if the U.S. is hitting Alberta with chemtrails, her hands are somewhat tied as a regional leader in Canada. I don't think so. You can make phone calls and find out what the heck's going on. I have some limitations in what I can do in my job, she said. I don't know that I would have much power if that's the case, if that is the case, if the U.S. Department of Defense is spraying us. If the U.S. Department of Defense, which is a different country, is spraying Alberta, she thinks she'd have nothing she could do about that? She couldn't lodge a legal complaint with the United States? She couldn't talk to any of her legal experts and say, can Ottawa tell the United States to F off because look what they're doing to our skies? If there was any kind of indication this is true, going down this, it's the United States Department of Defense rabbit hole is insane. And saying I couldn't possibly do anything about it is also insane. You find out who it is, you send them a letter, you give them a timeline, and then you put a stop to it. Holy cow. She said she does what she can to investigate chemtrail allegations, checking with airports, the private sector, and with her government. But so far, no evidence has turned up that it's occurring. What's your game, Danielle Smith? Let's move on. Talking about crime. Wide Awake Media says, are Western governments deliberately allowing crime to spiral out of control as an excuse to roll out dystopian AI-controlled surveillance to keep you safe? Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. Holy cow, how did you know? Here is what Yonkers is doing with their AI cameras. Warning, there's a guy who just gets like stabbed here. He gets like, I don't know if he gets his throat cut or what, but this guy walks up and stabs this guy. And they're like, oh, the AI totally flagged that.
When seconds count,
He's just cutting people.
criminals may try.
1 Palisade Avenue for a stabbing in progress.
But there's no outrunning this camera network. Controlled not by human hands, but by computer software. This is the Yonkers Police Department's real-time artificial intelligence center.
Between the use of AI as well as our personnel in the field and in the aware room, we're able to multitask and get a ton of information in a short period of time.
Max Goldberg went from walking the beat to crime control, working in the nerve center with 400 cameras, watching New York State's third largest city. Goldberg says the system will pinpoint a problem without his intervention. He credits the Aware network with
All Goldberg wants now is a team of robot dogs, maybe with a gun on their head, maybe not, to go out and be deployed to keep the peace for your safety, comrade, said Goldberg.
Recently helping find a missing girl with autism by inputting her description.
Wearing a red top and black bottoms.
And just 3 minutes after the 911 call,
I was able to see her crouching down behind a vehicle, trying to hide from people.
from a fire to a stabbing rampage, the system's AI capability recognizes anything out of the ordinary, often flagging it before
the AI
911 is called.
Okay, so flagging it before the 911 is called. How many people that guy stab? How'd your system work? Like a stabbing rampage happened with your AI system and like nobody got there before he could stab the third person, right? Stabbing rampage. How many people got stabbed with your AI thing? It reminded me of Minority Report and the precogs and the conversation of like, oh man, this is the best thing ever. In Minority Report, the precogs view the future and, well, I mean, like this is pretty good. This will be outside of the YouTube show. We'll play it. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to canadapoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful